first role of Zainab Salamullah alayha here is to inform people exact details. You look at the knowledge of Sayyidah Zainab, you look at the courage of Sayyidah Zainab, you look at the eloquence of Sayyidah Zainab, you look at the analysis of Sayyidah Zainab. Wallah, this is something that Allah had agreed with your grandfather the Prophet, that we face trouble, we face tragedy in order to serve Islam. Wallah, Allah will give power to people on this earth who will build graves over them, who will mark them one by one, who will tell people what they had done, and who will bring a generation of people who year after year will commemorate Al-Husain, and who will make this place a visiting place. Wallah, our story, this event, this tragedy of Karbala will never be forgotten. Do not worry, O my nephew, the story of Al-Husain, the message of Al-Husain will carry.
What a night it was for the daughters of the Messenger of Allah, whom lofty eminence never forsook ever since they were born. It was only yesterday that they lived in the pavilions of greatness and the chambers of dignity, lit during the day by the sun of prophethood, and during the night by the star of caliphate, and by the lanterns emitting the radiance of sanctity. During this night they were left in the pitch dark, having lost those shining lights, their belongings plundered, their chambers burnt, fear overwhelming them. They remained among the corpses of those who used to be their protectors. Now they have neither protectors nor defenders. They do not know anyone who could defend them if they were to be attacked, or who would repel those who might terrorize them, or who would calm and pacify those who have lost their loved ones. Yes, there were among them children crying in anguish. There were mothers of children waned by the arrows, sisters of those who were martyred, mothers who lost their sons, and they were mourning their dear ones. Next to them were body parts amputated, corpses slashed and cut, necks covered with blood.
When the Imam left after his departure, obviously it was very sorrowful for the women and children. You could imagine a bunch of women and children out in the middle of the desert, surrounded by enemy lines. This was a huge tragedy on their heart.
And so in order to further please Ibn Ziyad, after the killing of Imam al-Husayn and his companions, he orders that the bodies be decapitated, all the heads be removed and carried on spears, and then horses to trample the bodies in order to satisfy Ibn Ziyad. So there were 72, the narrations say, and each one announced himself, so they knew who they were looking for. Find the body of Hur, find the body of Burair, find the body of Habib, find the body of Ali al-Akbar. And they searched, and each time they found a body, they would behead, and they would carry aloft on a spear the head, the blessed head of each one of the shuhada. And then they lined up the bodies in such a way that horses would be able to come and trample on their chests.
When Ali al-Asghar was killed, Imam Hussain, he dug a grave for him, he buried him. But what happened was, on the day of Ashura, on the 11th day, when Umar ibn Sa'd's army, they wanted to move, every tribe wanted a head for them to carry.
They searched out and they said there was an infant that belonged to Al-Husain. He brought him out. Where is he? So they looked, trying to find a fresh grave that was small, until they found near the entrance to the camp of Al-Husain a freshly dug grave. It was Ali al-Asghar.
They took him, they severed his head, and they put it on a spear.
A little child like that, they took off his head, and then they brought him with the rest of the shuhada in order to trample his small body, maybe 6 months, 7 months, the narrations say, such a small body, in order to be trampled by the hooves of these wild horses. And so Umar ibn Sa'ad calls out and he says, who will volunteer to trample these bodies?
Not anyone was willing to do this. But Umar ibn Sa'ad had 10 volunteers that said they'll do it. And what's interesting is that historians have mentioned their names, all these 10 men, and all of them have been recorded to be born from illegitimate relationships. The Imam and his companions and his soldiers, they were lined up, and these 10 knights, they trampled the bodies of the Imam along with his companions one by one, to the point that, you know, when a body is sleeping or is on the ground, it's a bit above the ground because of the width of the body. After the body was trampled, it was level to the ground. That means there wasn't a single bone in the body of Imam Hussain not shattered and not broken.
One of the Arab poets describes, he says, the horses, naturally, if you ride a horse, whenever an obstacle is presented before, what does it do? It leaps over the obstacle. He says that they had to bend, those 10 men had to bend the necks of the horses to force them to trample on the bodies of the shuhada, and that the horses were crying because they were trying to say, Sayyidi Aba Abdullah Udran, our apologies, O Master, we do not wish to do this, but it is not in our hands. And so the animals strained to avoid, to jump over the bodies. Instead, these 10 evil men forced them to trample with their hooves on the chests and bodies of these blessed shuhada.
Once all these bodies were scattered all over the battleground, it was something very, very scary. It wasn't just sadness. It was they had a mix of feelings of what's going to happen. They've lost all their loved ones, and now what's going to happen? What are they going to do to us?
أحرقوا بيوت الظالمين. He ordered for the tents of the household of Imam Hussain alayhi salam to be burnt. This is why they've narrated that all of Imam Hussein's household's tents, they were burnt except one which was left half burnt.
Umar ibn Sa'ad gave his men free rein, as if they were non-Muslims, as if they were from the Turks or from the Romans or from elsewhere, that they could attack them freely. One by one, the girls or the daughters of Rasulullah were attacked. Jewelry was taken from their ears, from their hands, from their ankles. Their clothes were snatched away. Whatever was in their tents was plundered. Fire was spread throughout the camp of Al-Husain, so that Zainab salamullah alayhi was running around trying to gather the orphans.
They started dispersing in the desert from all sides, and Zainab salamullahi alayha took on the responsibility of gathering them, collecting them, making sure they're all gathered at one specific place without missing any of the children, as per the request and the will of Al-Imam Al-Husain alayhi salam to her when he told her, Zainab, take care of my children after me and the family after me.
And this they carried out for the rest of the evening, rest of the day and the evening, attacking the household of the Prophet. They reached the tent where Imam Zain al-Abidin was laying there ill. Through the divine will of Allah, had Ali ibn al-Husayn come out to fight, he would have surely been killed. We saw a 6-month infant being killed. If Ali ibn al-Husayn had come out that day to fight, he would have been killed as well. So Allah had decreed that he would fall ill, so that he not fight, so that the message from the Prophet and the Imams would continue on to the next generations. They stood by the tent and they said, who is this son of Al-Husayn? He is Ali. Why is he still alive? Ibn Ziyad has commanded that all the sons of Al-Husayn be killed. And Shimr had taken a sword, trying to go to the Imam and attack him. Zainab came out and threw herself on Ali ibn al-Husayn, Zain al-Abidin, salamullah, and she says, if you want to kill him, you'll have to kill me first. An argument broke out between them until they asked Umar ibn Sa'ad, what shall we do? He said, he is ill, we shall take him to Ibn Ziyad and he will decide what to do with him.
The army of Umar ibn Sa'ad, they were too exhausted, so they had to stay for that night, or the night of the 11th, and then they moved one day after Ashura, which was the 11th of Muharram.
The most prized possession for the enemy that day was the head of Al-Husain salamullahi alayhi. And so Umar ibn Sa'ad said this must reach Ibn Ziyad as soon as possible to confirm what we have done here.
Umar ibn Sa'ad sent the head of Al-Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam to go ahead of them with Khawli and Hamid ibn Muslim to Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad, and then he took the family of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alih to Kufa.
Khawla was a barbarian, a ruthless, illiterate Bedouin who had no mercy in his heart. He decided to take the head of Imam Hussain to Kufa in the middle of the night.
This Khawla had two wives who were both lovers of the Ahlulbayt. So when he carried the head, the blessed head, from Karbala and moved towards Kufa, his house was outside Kufa.
So he took the head to his house.
And he placed the head, the blessed head, on a spot where a drop of blood had fallen. And the Imam Sadiq Salamullah alayhi, our sixth blessed Imam, when he went to do the ziyarah of Imam al-Husayn, he stopped at that place. He stopped at Al-Hanana and he prayed there, and he said, this is where the head of my grandfather Al-Husayn was placed before being taken to Ibn Ziyad. Until today, there is a mashhad there. There is a small maqam for the Imam where the Imam prayed, and it is mustahab to recite a dua when you reach there and to recite prayers upon that point.
But when she saw the head of the grandson of Rasulullah, she was disgusted by Khawla.
Khawla wake up in the morning and went to see Ibn Ziyad and present him with what he had gained from this victory.
And they told him that Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad is sleeping, he doesn't receive anyone now. They told him, come back in the morning.
This man, Khawla or Khuli, who had taken the head of Al-Husayn and left it in his house at night, had now come to Ibn Ziyad. And he was boastful of what he had. He had the head of Al-Husayn with him, and he came to the mansion of Ibn Ziyad, and he says to him, املأ ركابي فضة أو ذهبا قتلت خير الناس أما وأبا. Fill my bags, fill my stirrup, fill my hands with silver or gold. I have killed the one who had the best of parents. And he said this before a group who were with Ibn Ziyad. Ibn Ziyad became very angry. He said to him, if you knew he was the best, why did you attack him and kill him then? If you are saying to me that he was the best of people, how have you dared to kill him then and say this before me? So this man, Khawla, who was trying to please Ibn Ziyad, was now facing the anger of Ibn Ziyad, who had him killed.
Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad, the ruler of Kufa, he ordered two of the army. One was Shimr ibn al-Jawshan, the second was Muhaffaz ibn Tha'laba al-A'idhi. They were in charge of the captives, of the hostages of Ahlulbayt after Ashura. They were held, they were chained by their necks and their hands and feet. They were placed on the camels.
However, these camels had no saddles. And what happened is that their legs would start bleeding because of the friction between them and the hairs of these camels.
These were the daughters of Rasulullah. These were the daughters of Al-Husayn. These were the daughters of Imam al-Mu'mineen. And they were carried on these camels without any saddles. Women and children and infants. And it was a message in order to say these people are captives. They do not deserve to have saddles. They should not be treated well. Imam Zain al-Abidin had his hands tied by chains, and his hands were tied to his neck. So his hands were in a shape very close to his chest like this, and a large iron chain was placed around his neck.
And you have to remember that Imam Zain al-Abidin alayhi salam was also ill. He was very ill. In that sort of state, he was being tortured. He was chained down. He was in this jama'ah the whole way to Kufa, and perhaps even to Damascus. All the way to Damascus, he was in this state.
The ladies pleaded thus, for the love of Allah, please take us to those killed. When they saw how they had lost their limbs, how the spears had drank of their blood, and how the horses had trampled upon them, they screamed and beat their faces in anguish. Zainab cried out, "O Muhammad, here is Hussain in the desert, covered with blood, his limbs cut off. Here are your daughters taken captive, and your offspring slaughtered." These words caused friends and foes alike to weep, and even the horses' tears ran on their hooves. Then she put her hands under his sacred body and lifted it as she supplicated, saying, "O Lord, do accept this sacrifice from us."
Umayyad propaganda, basically. They had announced to the people that the battle that took place in Karbala was against Khawarij. There were a group of people that were outcasts, that were trying to overthrow Yazid and the Khilafah, and they were trying to stir trouble.
So Zainab, before they entered Kufa, she knew this city was hostile to them. She had lived there. She was there with her father, Amir al-Mu'mineen. And when they arrived to Kufa, carried as captives into this city in a way which showed that they had suffered extremely. Some of them were bleeding, some of them were injured, their clothes were tattered, dusty faces. The sun I remember some of them had not drank for 2 or 3 days of water, sometimes longer. They had seen tragedies before. Imagine seeing your brothers and your cousins and your nephews killed before your eyes. You can imagine the way these people looked. And Zain al-Abidin, the blessed Imam Salamullahi alayhi, in chains, his neck bleeding from this heavy chain that was around his neck. And Zainab had gathered the women and children.
The people of Kufa came out to see what's going on. Some of them heard the news and knew what was happening, and others did not.
When they entered Kufa, people thought they were Khawarij. Historians say that the people of Kufa were celebrating, they were dancing, they were celebrating basically, but more so in Damascus, because Kufa was still close to Karbala. Muslim ibn Aqil was just there about a month before. The men in Kufa had written to Imam Hussain asking him to come to Kufa. Thus, some of them knew the story, others didn't.
Who are these people? Where have they come from? What is going on? Now, if these were the Shia of Ahlulbayt, they would have known instantly. How would you not recognize your Imam? If Zain al-Abidin, the fourth blessed Imam Salamullahi alayhi, was standing before you and you were a believer, you would know he is the Imam. If Zainab, the daughter of Amir al-Mu'mineen, who you knew was the daughter of the first Imam, of course you would recognize them. So these people, of course, saying, who are these people? Where are these captives from?
But then after a while, they realized that they don't look like Khawarij. They don't look like outcasts. They look like respected religious people. So one lady, her heart broke for Sayyidah Zainab and at the sight of a bunch of children without their parents. So she brought them food. And apparently it was sadaqah. She said this is charity. Sayyidah Zainab didn't eat from that food.
She said, Wallah, it is haram for us to say sadaqah. We are the family of the Prophet, sadaqah is haram for us. And she took away this food and gave it back to the people and said, we are the family of the Prophet, we cannot take sadaqah from you.
It was then that people began to realize that this is the family of Rasulullah. They're not Khawarij, they're not outcasts. This is the granddaughter of Rasulullah. These are the grandchildren of Rasulullah. So that the picture changed.
It is mentioned that everyone suddenly started shedding tears and they started crying. And apparently everyone was very sorry to what took place.
But she realized that these people were ignorant, that they did not recognize who they were. So she was forced to give a speech.
Ya Ahl al-Kufa, Ya Ahl al-Qatli wal-Khatli wal-Ghadr. O people of Kufa, you are a people of basically, you're traitors. You invited us to support us and then you turned against us, killing us, and now you're coming and weeping for what happened to us?
You have committed a great sin. What have you done? What have you done in these past few days? You have stood with someone who broke Islam. You signed up for the death of Islam.
فلا رقعت الدمعة. May this tear never dry up. Do you know who you have killed? You have killed a piece of the Prophet's corpse, a piece of the body of the Holy Prophet. أتدرون أي كبد لرسول الله فريتم.
Because at that time the propaganda mission was very strong. She says, in case you did not know, Al-Husain was killed yesterday. His men, his brothers, all that supported him, these few men were killed yesterday. That's why we are being brought here today. So before you start to cry and wail and be upset at the condition we are in, yesterday Al-Husain was slaughtered. If you want to cry, you cry over that. And this was news to the people of Kufa. They had not heard of this. So the first role of Zainab Salamullah alayha here is to inform people exact details. So that not 10 years later, somebody will say, actually Yazid tried to make a deal with Al-Husain, and then Hussein passed away after he was shot by a single arrow, and then Hussein died tragically because he was ill. No. So that very clearly people know exactly what happened to Imam Al-Husain Salamullah.
So that kind of indicates that the people of Kufa were overcome by emotions.
After Zainab had begun to speak and the Kufans started to hear this information, the news, they were so surprised. And the Imams and Abidin Salamullah alayha says to his aunt Zainab, he says, my aunt, this is enough. You have given them enough information and you can see what has happened to them. They have become hysterical because the effects of the Ahlulbayt's words on people is that it goes straight to their hearts. Those who Allah has opened their hearts, they will immediately feel the effect of the words of Ahlulbayt.
Once they were silent, Imam Sajjad alayhi salam praised Allah and glorified Him and saluted the Prophet. Then he said,
O people, whoever recognizes me knows me, and whoever does not, let me tell him that I am Ali, son of Al-Husain ibn Ali ibn Abi Talib. I am the son of the man whose sanctity has been violated, whose wealth has been plundered, whose children have been seized. I am the son of the one who's been slaughtered by the Euphrates, neither out of blood revenge, nor on account of an inheritance. I am the son of the one killed in the worst manner. This suffices me to be proud. O people, I plead to you in the name of Allah. Do you not know that you wrote to my father, then deceived him? Do you not grant him your covenant, your promise, and your allegiance? Then you fought him? May you be ruined for what you have committed against your own souls and out of your corrupt views. Through what eyes will you look at the Messenger of Allah when he says to you, you killed my progeny, violated my sanctity, so you do not belong to my nation?
Loud cries rose, and they said to each other, you have perished, yet you are not aware of it. Then he, alayhi salam, said,
May Allah have mercy on anyone who acts upon my advice, who safeguards my legacy with regards to Allah.
The people start to weep profusely. They become almost insane with their emotions. They start to cry out, Ya ibn Rasulullah, we will fight with you. Command us, tell us what to do, we will fight, we will support. And Imam says, no, wallah, I will not listen to your words. You said the same to my father Hussain, you said the same before to my uncle Al-Hasan, you said the same before to Amir al-Mu'mineen. No, Allah, I will not listen to your words. And with this, the Imam ends this gathering and they are moved to the mansion of Ibn Ziyad.
زمین کربلا دادی شکستم جوانان یک به یک بردی ز دستم زمین کربلا فصل بهار است ز خون نوجوانان لاله زارم زمین کربلا با حیله بازی عجب کردی و تو مهمان نوازی زمین کربلا باهل بازی عجب کردی و تو مهمان نوازی زمین کربلا با این اراده تو مهمان میکوشی عادت که داده زمین کربلا رنجی